Sequencing is a lot of fun for me.
I like sequencing too. I think it's a really important part of teaching yoga because, I feel like it's really important because of the preventative aspect it has in
Yeah,
um people injuring themselves. Like prevents injury. That's what I'm trying to say.
for sure. And a
Yeah.
lot of the videos that you've done over the years for the community, the little quick anatomy videos,
Yeah.
outside of the training, but just the ones we have on YouTube, we get so much feedback on those too because they're helpful. They're quick. It's like, hey, when you're doing this, here's the things you can do, and here's the things to be aware of to prevent injuries and to get the most out of this posture. And all of that is coming from this informed place with all of your anatomy training. And I think it's so helpful for all of our students and the general public.
Well, I'm glad. Yeah, I anatomy is something that it's just like it's always going in my head.
I
And
know.
so it's really fun to take and like, oh, I can apply it to yoga. Oh, I can apply it to massage. Oh, I can apply it to, doing a push-up or like whatever, you know.
But like this stuff inside out. How many times have I texted you like, "Hey, my dad injured his quadricep or whatever," and you're like, "Oh no, it's probably not that. It's probably this because the body works together." And I'm like, "She's right. I knew that, but I need that reminder." But it's always top of mind for you, and I love that.
Yeah, it always is. I think I drive my family nuts. We don't care. I'm like, but I care. I feel the need to share this with you.
This is important. Yeah,
This
I love it.
matters.
It does, though. It does. And I love the idea that you always really drive home that, everything in the body works together. So we can't just isolate this one part. It's so helpful.
Well, and I think that's what happens because a
Yeah.
lot of times, like when you learn anatomy, you learn it section by section by section or like system by system.
Yes.
And so there's this like mental block almost in terms of like what is connected to what. And like you learn it, but they don't really explain it and why it matters, at least in the experiences that I've taken, like AMP at the college or through like trade school. Um, there's a lot of information, which makes it really confusing. But if you break it down with the intention of connection and actual understanding, I think it makes it a lot easier to digest and remember.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think so too. I think so too. And especially, when you're leading other people through these movement practices and the transitions too, because a lot of times, it's not just the posture itself, but it's how are we transitioning from here to there? And are we doing it in a safe way? Because sometimes I think students are moving really quickly and people are in a rush to get there and they aren't necessarily being mindful. And that's a lot of times when injuries occur.
Yeah. And I know like depending like and correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's vinyasa, right? Where like the
Yeah,
power is you gain strength in the transition, right? So then
absolutely.
that makes those transitional areas even more impactful
Yeah,
and
yeah,
important.
and important, yeah, and you're pulling in muscles that you don't otherwise engage in the transitions a lot of times.
Right. And then if you have something like synergistic dominance, right, where like one muscle group kind of takes over that, like if you have like an injured muscle, and we talk about this in the training, synergistic dominance is where like one of the muscles is maybe injured for some reason or another, right? And so the helper muscles or the synergists take over that job. And then they end up being the
Hmm.
the muscle that propels that limb or whatever body part through the movement and it can cause some like muscle imbalances and stuff.
Yes, yes. And you do talk a lot about that in the training. I think it's been helpful too. People are like, "Oh, that's what happened,"
Well, it's kind of confusing if you
It
don't
can
know. I've
be.
had so
Yeah.
many clients. I have this giant knot, like even my own dad. I'm like, well, yeah, that's because it's not really working the way it's supposed to. I mean, it's working. I don't want to freak him out, but it's working, but maybe this is what's happening. But I also think it's really important to always draw a clear line of like we don't diagnose people. Right? Like staying
Yes.
in scope, I think is another thing
Go for
because
practice. Yeah.
people look up to their yoga instructor, right? And they see all this information they have in their heads and they want that insight. But then like we have to be careful because we don't want to tell them something, you know, accidentally and then
Yes.
have them feel like, oh, I don't need to be careful of this, or I shouldn't go to the doctor because they said it was fine. But in really, that's not really the case.
That's not the case. And so many times they come up to you, and then your heart is like, "Oh, because you wanna help," and they're saying,
Yes.
"I have this pain here, and I don't know what's going on, and when I do this, this happens," and it's like staying in that lane of, okay, I can offer a modification, but depending on the situation, you want to make sure that they've checked things out with their healthcare provider first. And a lot of times people don't know what's going on in their body. Like they come into yoga and they say, I'm having back pain. So they think I need to stretch my back. But a lot of times you've probably overstretched your back. You may need to stretch the front body.
Right.
And
Thank you.
so
Yeah.
like, no, don't do that. No more fork boats for you. Because
Right.
it's like, and you want them to be balanced, of course. But I think that that's what people tend to assume is like, if I have low back pain or I have neck pain, I just want to go in the C curve and like stretch it all out. And it may bring momentary relief. But ultimately, they probably have like a weakened front body and they're probably spending too much time kind of hunched over. And so it's like, how can we get them to open? And maybe that reduces the back pain, or maybe it's a core issue, or you know how this goes. There's so
Yeah.
many things it can
Yeah.
be. And so you don't know what on the body is tugging on the back that's causing problems, but there's something else going on. It's probably not the back that's the problem.
Right. But then people think you're crazy. Like,
Yeah.
well, why are you talking? Why did you tell me to do this? It's not related to that. I'm like, but it might be. But maybe let's just try it, right? Let's just try it and see if it makes you
Humor
feel
me.
better. Right?
Yeah. I know. I
Yeah.
know.